My name is Keone Nunes, and I will be your host this morning, afternoon, depending on where you're from. And we will be talking about native languages in a non-academic setting. So hopefully, this will be something that will be interesting to all of you. Okay, so this is a very interesting topic, and we're presenting this topic as part of what we do in Ka'anani'au, and this is our staff. Myself standing up on the left of your screen, Napua, who is also with us. She is in that bright orange uh, jacket. Susan White, who is our financial wizard, is right next to her. And Matt Ing, who puts together a lot of these webinars, he is on your far right. A little bit about ANA. ANA promotes social and economic self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects and training and technical assistance to eligible tribe and Native organizations, and through advocacy and policy developments. ANA's vision is to have all Native communities are thriving. Teaching native language in a non-academic setting, I think a lot of people kind of automatically assume that the only way that you can learn language is through a classroom. You'll see in this presentation that there are many, many different methodologies in teaching language that do not include classroom settings. And I think that that's really important for everyone to understand because oftentimes when people are given the choice of learning the language in a classroom or in a different situation, there's a sort of a hesitancy in attending language instruction outside of a classroom. And so I think that we need to open the discussion a little bit more and open our minds, especially in our own um, communities and our own organizations, to be able to look at what are other ways of teaching language that does not include just classroom situations. Some of the things that are already being done now uh, that is very important and has been making an impact on language learning outside of the classroom are, are things on this screen. You have web-based family learning. Uh, BasicHawaiian.com is an ANA funded project that is currently teaching people Hawaiian language through the internet. And I think that that's really important. As many of us are getting more and more technical, we understand the importance of the use of technology to promote language. Beneath that is the Kali'i project, and this is a project also in Hawaii that teaches youth the language through cultural training and youth leadership development. And this is something that might be very important for younger people. Oftentimes, when we look at language, we look at the fact that the language is not being continued because younger people, for whatever reasons, are not speaking it as much. And so the incorporation of youth with uh, this non-academic way of learning might reinstill the importance of the language within the culture. On the top right, you have Te Karere. Te Karere is actually a Maori language television news broadcast. Now, although it's not ANA funded, I think it really shows us the possibilities of having language being more normalized within all of our households. And one way of doing it is to broadcast it. Um, and there are many, many native language broadcasts throughout the United States now, uh, through radio, primarily through radio. And there are some newscasts that are done in native languages. Now, these native languages might not be native to the Pacific or to America in general, but they're still being broadcast, and that shows the importance of the language within all of the communities. And that's something that should be really looked at for the future because native languages being heard again through the television, through the radio, normalizes the language within the households. Now, Pa'atautautano, the lower right, they also have a different way of learning the language, and this is immersion through chant and dance. And we'll revisit this a little bit later in our webinar. The basic stages of a language project starts with the launch. Um, Within this stage, oftentimes things like language assessments are done. This is also the time where the decision is made whether or not you are going to teach a language through native speakers, through second language learning speakers who are very proficient in the language and is also proficient in English. So they use English as uh, a basis for their language instruction. Or are you going to utilize a different methodology? So this is all done in the launch stage. This is very, very important because this sets the foundation for the project itself and for the steps that come after. The second basic step is the growth. You have the launch, you set up your language program, then you start recruiting people. Then hopefully there are a lot of people who are really, really interested. Now, this is when you start looking at different methodologies also to attract people into your project. Some people do not feel comfortable basically in a classroom setting. They are much, much more um, vibrant in different type of settings. So this growth stage is very, very important because this is when you start building upon that foundation that you laid on the launch in order to go to that third steps, which is how to sustain not only the program, not only the project, but to sustain the language. So this is really, really important. This growth stage determines how much of the language will be sustained in the future. So these are the basic three stages of language projects. And again, this is very, very um, basic, very fundamental type of stages that we look at for languages. Okay, when you're establishing a language project, in part of the launch section, and this is the early part, you have to consider your capacity. Why is it that your organization is going to be the one that can really make an impact on this language in your community? You also have to assess your needs. What is the language status? How many native speakers do you have? And just because people are native speakers, it doesn't mean that they are comfortable teaching the language. They may be comfortable sharing it and doing it in a conversational type of situation, but they might not be comfortable in breaking down the language in parts necessary for students to be able to digest. Yeah. And you have to look at what are your barriers. You have to be very, very honest about these things because sometimes you think that, well, we're going to start this and everybody's going to just rally around us, and all of a sudden you don't have that much interest. And is it because there's not the interest in the language, or is it because there's not the same type of interest in the methodology in which the instruction is being given? So those are some things that you need to look at. Yeah. You also need to map your assets. Look at the people, the places, the property, and partners. Um, of course, people are essential as far as this is concerned. Uh, and it would be very, very important to have a really good assessment of these people and the working relationship with the organization, as well as the working relationship with each other. Many uh, organizations run into problems because of past political differences, and these political differences might not be um, current, might not be contemporary. It might be something that started 100, 200, 300 years ago that still affect the way people view organizations and things. But you have to be able to understand these assets and to see how everything connects. And that's how you map it, not just to list it down, but see how things connect to each other. Like, are the people in places where it would be a natural way of bringing together people to learn the language? Um, what are some of the partners that you need to really make this work well? In many communities, especially with non-academic language learning, there's not that many resources as far as material resources like papers, pens, overheads, that kind of things. Do you need partnerships for that? Because it's really important. Oftentimes, in learning language outside of the classroom setting, you are dealing with very, very grassroots community people. And you might need to know what is some of the things that would be necessary. Do you need a babysitting service while the language class is being held? All of those type of things. The last and most important thing is to involve your community. You have to have community involvement with your language project. If you don't have community involvement with your language project, then it's just a very, very academic pursuit that might not make that much of an impact in your community. And many of our languages are in dire need of revival. And so you need to have your community. Remember, language is meant to communicate with each other. And so if your community is not using language to communicate to each other, then it becomes just an academic exercise. So you really need to involve your community with your language project. In the launch, there's a community planning process, and we've gone over some of this already. Good planning starts with your community. You ensure alignment with reality. Again, you might think it's a good idea, but if your community is not ready for it, it's not really going to happen. Um, so you need to have that involvement and not just from your organization and their administration and the staff. Yeah. Again, you need to ensure community buy-in and you need to energize the community to get people excited about the project. Yeah, because then they'll come. They'll come and they'll learn. Even if it's difficult, if they're excited about it, um, then they'll learn. You know, a lot of Native people, a lot of us, we suffer from one thing, and that is the thought that just because we're Native, that the language should come to us naturally. We'll have genetic memory. You know what? For some things, I think that definitely is true. Um, in my experience from watching and seeing other language programs out there, that's not a reality to for a lot of our native populations. Yeah. So you need to energize the community and even though it might be hard, if the energy is there, if the positiveness is there, if the excitement is there, they'll keep coming back. Okay? You have to have the right stakeholders at the table. And oftentimes with language, this includes elders. You have to have teachers and non-teachers. You have to have community partners, specialists, advocates. Everybody needs to be uh, at the table, but you need to have the right people because if you don't have the right people at the table, if you have one or two or three missing links at the table trying to formulate this project, then it's not going to work. Yeah. And you have to choose the right outreach methods. Um, do meetings work? Do surveys work? Do charrettes, focus groups work? What works within your community to get honest feedback and to get the type of foundational information that you need to start a very successful language project. Along those lines, we have a very special guest. This is Nicole Calvo, and she is Executive Director of the State Welfare Foundation. She was also worked on a language program with Paatau Tautano that included a language survey. And the language survey became the foundation for their language project now, which is learning the language through chant and dance. She also has worked with the Guam Preservation Trust, and she's been involved with many things, both on the administrative level, and I can honestly say, in knowing her, she's very involved with the community and is not afraid to go out and not just be an administrator, but actually uh, be in the trenches working for the betterment of her community. Nicole, I would I'd like to hand this over to you, and you can talk a little bit about your survey and the things that has happened.
Half a day, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon from wherever you're at right now in your homes or in your offices. Thank you, Keone, for that introduction. I'm very happy to be part of the presentation today. It's been a while since I've done these things, but when Keone had asked me and Matt, to come and help for today's presentation, I got excited because I had forgotten. I mean, when I talked to you about what we did, this was something that happened in 2009. And so currently I'm no longer with Pa'atatatana, but yes, my heart and my passion is still with the people there that are doing the work, the lovely work that they do. So let me just start off by telling you a little bit about the organization Pa'atatatana. I started working for them, I want to say, in 2008. And then in 2009, they had decided this organization is a nonprofit organization in Guam, and their mission is to preserve, perpetuate, and promote the cultural traditions of the Chamorro people of Guam and the Marianas. And part of what they do, the majority of what they do, is um, the cultural arts. So it's focused on Chamorro dance and chant and song. And then they do things like weaving and other cultural traditions that accompany what they do with the dance. And so when they hired me, they had the idea that they realized what they were doing is not just dance and chant, but they were also doing language, and so they needed someone to kind of help them go through that direction. And like Keone was talking about with the stages of a language project, um, I was going to do the launch for them. And the launch would be, we had decided with Pa'a that the best way was to do an assessment of the Chamorro language in Guam. And so we were able successfully to get the grant with ANA, and we were so thankful that we did. It was a 1 year language grant, language assessment grant. We conducted it in 2009 and 2010, and then we had, when I was doing this, and I was new to the whole grant writing process, and I think I got a little too aggressive. So as we told ANA what we wanted to do, we wanted to survey 10% of the Chamorro population on Guam, which came out to be about like over 6,500 Chamorros of Guam. And so this 1 year survey had us identifying, I think we did about 6,542 Chamorros. Anyway, it's funny because when we were doing it, if you think about that number, it's quite daunting, really. But with the help of a professor from the University of Guam who gave us his expert knowledge with surveying and so forth, because he's a professor in the public administration college. He told us if you're going to do that many people, you need to do a petite survey. So we ended up focusing on a 10 question survey to try to get out to this target group. We did it, and when Keone was talking about taking a look at the environment and how you're going to do this, we realized originally we wanted to do a door-to-door survey similar to like other surveys that are done, but it wasn't going to happen that way. And the people, the women that applied for positions for this particular project were clever enough to tell me, allow us to do it in the areas where we know we'll find the Chamorro. And so in Guam, and of course it makes sense because culturally on the island, as I'm sure as many of the other Pacific Islanders share the same kind of cultural value with the way in which we honor our dead and those who passed away. And we know that on Guam, when a loved one of the family does pass on, there are ceremonies that happen for about 9 days. And every night, the families and friends will gather for 9 days, to kind of pray for this individual. And this is where my project assistants went out. And I know it may seem kind of inappropriate for them to be asking people at these functions to fill out a survey, but the families and the people, the Chamorros that were there, were very happy to do so. I think on Guam, they realized that if there was a concern in the community, and here is an organization that was addressing that concern because people were worried about what's happening with the language, where are we going with this? So they were very I think they were pleased to do it. And so it was just, something that they would do. And then also my assistants realized that, we needed to do other outreach events to get this number. And so they did it at festivals around the island. Every village on Guam has like a certain festival at different times of the year. And they went out to those festivals to set up a little tent, and they were able to do the surveys with the community members. So we gathered that. When we did that assessment of the 6,500 Chamorros, the interesting things that we found in that assessment, the results of that assessment were, for example, and I don't think it was something that was a surprise to us. It validated what we initially thought, was that the younger people, the younger generation, had a poorer handle on language comprehension and so forth. And we knew that it was stronger among the older the participants were of the survey. Their skills were stronger, and we knew that going in. What we also took a look at was where they were learning, where they were hearing the language, and we realized, based on the survey results, was that they were hearing it at home and with family settings. And it wasn't at school, and it wasn't in the workplace. So we said, okay, that's important. It's something that they're hearing in the home front that's outside of a more structured environment. And then the other thing that was quite interesting was that um, these results kind of showed us too that one of the questions that we put in there was, is it important? Is the Chamorro language important to you? And that was like the last question. And it was like overwhelmingly about 95% of the respondents, or about 90% of the respondents said yes, they felt very strongly that it was important. So we knew then that the community would be in support of whatever type of language project we were going to go to develop and launch because of this survey. And so that first stage of launching, this language assessment, was very key for Pa'atatatano when they took it back. And we all kind of looked at it, analyzed it, and said, okay, how are we going to now, once we did this assessment? Because a lot of the people in the community that you see in the pictures there were also asking us, well, and so what happens after this assessment? What are you guys just, are you just going to publish the report and that's it? What's going to happen? And so we knew at PA, we needed to make it happen. And the people at Pa'atatatano are so devoted to that. And so essentially what came from that is this next step, which would be the Chamorro language through chants, prayers, and songs project. And so in short, we called it the CLCS project. And we did what PA is strong at, and that is the cultural component, the fine arts component of dance and chant. And we utilized that, what their strength was, to deliver the language in that way. And so it really was learning the language outside of the classroom. This is totally what that project did. And at the time, we didn't think of it that way. We just knew we weren't the academics to go in and teach it in the classroom. We didn't have that, but we did have our master of Chamorro dance, Frank Rabon. He's been doing this now with Pa'a for many years. I mean, the majority of his life, I want to say it's over 40 years, that he's been doing dance and chant with children, generations of children now that have come to him. And many of these children have now grown up and have their kids or their grandkids going into Frank's different groups. And that's what Pa'atatatano is. It really, it's an umbrella organization of the Chamorro dance groups. And in Guam, we call them the Guma, or house, the different dance houses under the Chamorro dance and chant. And Frank has been the master of all of these different dance groups and their leaders. And many of their leaders were his students as well. And so that thought was, we wanted to develop an instrument, a tool that the dance leaders of Pa'a could utilize to help to perpetuate the language. And that's this trying to gather the different chants and songs from our elders, or even not just the elders, because we had a lot of younger people who were writing music, and lyrics to Chamorro songs and making chants. And we said, okay, we wanted to incorporate that as well. So this Chamorro Language Through Chants and Prayers and Songs project was a 3-year grant from ANA. So it happened right after we were done with the assessment grant. We applied for this one, and and we first year was to gather from across the island these chants and songs that were not documented. And when we say not documented, they were not musically transcribed. And we realized, yes, people will have the lyrics, but if they don't have the melody, you know, I don't. We didn't know how that was going to be preserved properly. So this was our way of doing this. We had a music educator who was on board with us, a piano teacher as well, and she was notating, making the musical notations of the chants that were recorded from the elders or from some of the other people that were giving us chants and songs that they had remembered from their elders, from their parents, and so forth. And it took us about a year to do all of that. And so the result was compiling essentially what is a music book of Chamorro chants and songs with the musical notations on it. Once we were able to do that, that was published. And then we took that and we gave it to the dance leaders. And this music educator was able to work with the dance leaders in the proper ways to teach these songs and so forth to the children in their dance houses. And again, this wasn't in a classroom setting per se. So most of these dance groups, when they do have their workshops or their sessions, they're doing it in the village mayors community centers. A lot of them are outdoor. They just have it's not air conditioned. It's not a proper dance studio. It's just a shelter that they go under, and then they do their dance and their chant. And throughout those sessions, it really is an immersion class, because when Master Frank Ribon conducts his sessions on Friday evenings, I think he does it on Tuesdays and Fridays, at one of the village mayors who's been doing it with Frank for like 30 years. This village has been really committed to that cause. And when Frank gathers his groups, and any given night, there could be 100 of them in that particular session, 100 dancers or practitioners, I'm sorry. And he is speaking completely in the native tongue. He rarely uses English when he's speaking to the students. And these kids their age ranges from like 5 years old to like 45 years old. So Frank had mentioned, and this is one of the things that we got, was anecdotally, Frank said to us that his first class of students, and he must have had about 15, these now have become the dance leaders of the different Guma in Guam, the different dance houses. Many of them came to him not knowing how to speak the native tongue. And their parents wanted their children to learn something of Chamorro culture, and Frank was the instrument to do that for them, and it was through the dance and then through the chant. And now today, as young men and women in their early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and so forth, they are very fluent in the language, and it's being utilized when they go into their dance groups, and they teach the children as well. So it's taking something that these kids with their parents have a passion for, which is the dance and the chant, and the singing, and then they bring it in, and the component there for the language learning was because it was all being spoken in the native tongue. And it's amazing when you go into those classes and you see the 5-year-olds, and Frank is yelling out a dance position in Chamorro, and they're all aligning. And maybe a lot of that is because they're following what other people are doing, but later on, these kids also, in some of the performances, there's a moment in one of the performances where for the young men, they come out and they start speaking. There's a narration that they do, and it's all done in the Chamorro language. And they sit and they write and they talk about it with each other, and they're speaking in the language, and they're talking about what they're going to say at this moment. And yes, a lot of it is written out, just like some of us write our speeches out before we present in front of people and so forth. But it's the language that they're using, the indigenous language. And it's amazing when you see that performance, and your heartstrings are pulled at because you hear these kids speaking the language in the fluently, and you're thinking this is something that's going to stick with them. It's not something they're going to easily forget, because when they're in the classroom and they're learning it, when they get home, if they're not utilizing it, it's going to be waste. It's going to be wasted. We realize that with Pa'a, they had the right conditions for the language, because this is something that was outside of the classroom. It was an additional thing that they were doing. Not only do they do it, sometimes some of these dance groups meet 3, 4 times a week. Then they have their performances, across the island for different events and so forth. And then they have their competitions. So there's always a constant working on what they're doing. It doesn't stop. And I think it happens properly because they're so passionate about it. And maybe that was one of the big successes of this Chamorro language project, the second part, because already they've had this passion and desire for it. But I think what it does, though, is there's so many people in this movement now. Pa'atatatano boasts membership of about 1,000 plus. Not only is it done on Guam, they have dance houses in the Northern Mariana Islands as well. They have groups out in California and I believe in Washington State. And just recently, not recently, but within the last 4 or 5 years, they've also been having dance groups in Japan. And again, that was from another grant that they did with ANA. But Frank has managed to go into Japan, into the Japanese market, and create these dance groups. And many of those groups come out to Guam for their annual Denanya Managua, which is a Chamorro dance competition and festival that's normally held in June. And these groups perform. And so you're seeing not only the Chamorros singing, dancing, or speaking the language, then you see people who are not indigenous. You see Filipino kids who are doing it. You see other children from the different Micronesian islands that are doing it as well. And then these Japanese women and their children who are also dancing, but they're singing and they're chanting in Chamorro. And then when they come out from the performances and they're talking, if you go to the back of the stage where all the groups are waiting, you can just hear it. You hear the language being spoken. And some of it is maybe not as fluent as others, but it's a start. And I think that's what's important, for getting the language for doing it. You got to start somewhere. And they're not all going to be native speakers, or they're not going to be fluent speakers, not all of them. But when you see it in practice and when you hear it being done, there is nothing better. There's no greater feeling than that. So this webinar this morning about doing a language, learning native languages in the non-academic setting, I think is so key. There's so many possibilities. I think about what Pa did, and it could be easily done for everything. It could be easily done for having a project with, outrigger canoeing and teaching students about the proper ways of doing any kind of traditional or cultural tradition for any indigenous group. Utilizing that way, whether it's cooking, whether it's weaving, whether it's learning how to fish, whatever the cultural traditions are that we have. If you utilize the language while doing it, and having calling in people who are interested in whatever the topic or subject or the cultural tradition may be, you have the proper environment. So that's pretty much it. Huh. Yoni?
Thank you, Nicole. No, that was perfect, because I think a lot of people, when looking at language programs, um, don't really look at the impact in its entirety and the possibilities. And so, it starts with a simple survey, and then it goes out into a program that really, really reaches thousands of people. And I think that that's really important to acknowledge, and thank you for all of your work. That's been something that is really important for us to take into consideration. Yeah. Now, all of this start of the language, and Nicole covered it real eloquently as to what are some of the things that was accomplished after the launch. And this is some things that I think is really important for everyone to look at. How do you keep the project going? And Tao Tao Tano has been successful with Frank Rubon to to be able to do this. And this is just a short example of how you do that. You gotta follow your plan. The milestones is really important. The OWP is really good for this, but I know a lot of you hate putting a OWP together, but the reality is the OWP really, really works well in this type of situation to follow your plan. Yeah. Um, Activate your anchor participants. In other words, uh, you have to start looking at the participants that you know will be very much involved with the program, who are very excited about the program. You have to you have to look at all of that. So you activate these anchor participants by pre-registering from the planning process, and you could add a checkbox to your survey or your meeting sign-up sheet so that you know that you can count on them for their participation in the project. Yeah. And scout and set up project sites. Sometimes people are more interested in having projects that are more accessible to the staff and to the office than to the community. Really look at that, really understand that, because um, there are many people in the community that could be really good participants, but they might not have access to transportation or something of that nature. And so you have to go to the community and see where would be a really good place that would be sort of central to where your participants will be and would be comfortable for them to do that. Of course, you have to set up your office and hire staff. And again, take those things into consideration. Who are you going to hire and where are you going to set up your office? Yeah. There are strategies and methods. And a lot of these come from examples that I'm familiar with in Hawaii, um, because this is where my home base is, and so I'm familiar with a lot of those type of methods and strategies. One thing that has been proven to be very successful is language immersion camps. These language immersion camps can last anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks, and when you go into these immersion camps, they actually just speak the language. And oftentimes, these immersion camps are not static. In other words, they might use one place as their home base, but they would go camping around the islands and they would be talking about different areas of the island and explaining different resources from seaweeds to fish um, to plants and things of that nature all around the islands and doing it all in an immersion uh, method. And so this is really, really good for people who are not necessarily beginners, who have some proficiency within the language but want to increase their proficiency. Yeah. This also is really good because oftentimes these language immersion camps are not just regulated to kids, they're regulated to the entire family. And so, with that, the entire family is learning from the grandparent all the way um, to the child. They all participate in the same way. And maybe the grandparents can speak real well in the native language, but they don't often get the opportunity to speak. And so I've seen participants in language immersion camps just start crying because they never heard their mother, their grandmother, their great grandmother speak. And it's because in their household they only spoke English. And given the right situation, they were able to come out of um, their shell, if you will, and speak a language that they were raised in and that they were very comfortable in. Again, another thing is web-based electronic learning. Um, for the most part, the whole society is becoming uh, huge technical experts. I mean, you look at kids who are 3, 4, 5 years old nowadays on computers, and they're very, very proficient in technology. One thing that really needs to be looked at is that how could you expand this? Because if we want the language to survive, then we need younger people speaking it. If we want younger people speaking it, how can we get them involved? Yeah, this is one method, web-based electronic learning, and it's not just for young people. There are a lot of adults out there who really want to learn, but for various societal reasons are not willing to go to a classroom. For some in Hawaii, there's uh, a shame associated with not being able to speak the language, and so they don't want to admit to this shame. They don't want to um, go out in public and attend a language class, if you will. And so these web-based electronic learning can be done at home and can be done in a safe environment. Another thing is social media. Create language groups online for co-teaching, conversation, news, and then you can coordinate real life meetups. You know, I'm waiting for Pokemon Go to be done in different languages, native languages, and see how good that goes. Well, that might not go too well, but anyway. So you look at social media because social media is very, very powerful. A lot of people are on Facebook and is very, very influential in that circle of people. And so you have is there a translation for social media? And one of the people who was in the group says social media is a noun. Kikino is a noun, and uh, kulelepahu is probably the word for both of those would be utilized in social media. So social media as a noun, social media um, as a kind of and this pushes language because what it does is that it's taking contemporary concepts and forcing the language to grow to accommodate those concepts. Yeah. Create conversational language groups, public meetups with focus on practical conversions. One of the best experiences I had was taking a group of kids to McDonald's and ordering in Hawaiian and having some of them turn to me and say, well, what is this in Hawaiian? And so, we would talk about those things. And so, giving directions, ordering food, sharing stories. I mean, um, if you're giving directions, what is off ramp in your native language? Those type of things. Those are learning. Uh, those are ways of learning that is more practical, and those are learnable, teachable moments. Uh, and the only way you do it is to put yourself into that situation. And within the classroom, you're thinking of different things, and outside, when you're in the environment, in the community, then you realize that there are so many things that we take for granted um, in English that we need to be able to look at those same things in our native language. Strategies and methods, social activities. In sports, call plays in your language for competitive advantage. That's been done in American Samoa when they come up to play in Hawaii or California. That's been done in Hawaii with kids from immersion school playing football, calling all their plays out loud on the line, and having some advantage. There was several curriculums that was language learning curriculums based on things like volleyball and softball. And these are other methods of getting younger people really, really excited about the language. The cultural links, link language to its cultural context. Uh, that's important because there are specific words for certain things that are done. What is the word for, if you're making a garden, what is a word for trenching the dirt in your cultural language, in your native language? What is the word for planting in your native language? When a sprout comes out, what is that word? Oftentimes, within the classroom situation, you know the word for sprout, but sprout can mean so many different things in English, and it can mean so many different things. Might be several different words in the native language for the same thing. So you put it within the cultural context and you know exactly what it means. Um, and this is something that, again, this context does not uh, allow itself to be part of the English translations because it's just really, really different. Yeah. Part of growth is, for many people, is the use of proficiency assessment tools. There are several proficiency uh, assessment tools that we have as an example. The Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test. It's good for practical knowledge, and this is for everyday objects and things like that, where you look at a picture and you write down what it is in the native language. And so that's a proficiency test. Another one is social skills rating scale. And this is useful for daily protocols. What do you do when you meet a person? How do you address them and things of that nature? So this is another assessment tool. There is also a Hawaiian language proficiency scale, and this reflects the cultural mastery of the language. So it's a combination of not only the linguistic, but the cultural nuances that occurs in all of our native languages. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in something like this, to look at the Hawaiian language proficiency scale and just work it so that it would fit your needs. Or you can create your own. You know, there's nothing wrong with creating your own assessment tools as long as it is a true assessment tool and not one that just will have the person skate through. This is the Hawaiian language proficiency scale categories. Um, Holona, no, no, Nohia, Laua, Makakau, Pahe'e, and Loea. Loea is expert, yeah. And so Holona is the bottom end of the scale, And you're going to see that within the vocabulary, you have vocabulary, proverbs, songs, chants. You're going to have different proficiencies within this. And I think this is kind of good because some people don't have very good of a vocabulary, but they're very, very good with songs or chants. So it gives you a very honest assessment of what you need to improve um, to reach the lower uh, point. And the vocabulary is 4,000 words, proverbs 400 words, songs 100, chant 100 plus, and all of these kinds of things. Yeah. Keep the momentum going. You gotta speak the language whenever possible and find new opportunities to use the language. We're very fortunate in Hawaii because Hawaiian is an official language of the state, and so you can go up to an ATM and you can press Hawaiian, and all of the commands for the ATM will come up in Hawaiian. So, this is a new opportunity, but it's also using it in a context where it's part of everyday life. Yeah. Maintain support and trust. Allow people to feel comfortable in trying and failing. You know, don't criticize them if they are really, really screwing up on the language, but encourage them to get better. Um, I should say, don't negatively criticize them because if that happens, then people just zone out. And I can tell you from personal experience that in English, that my teacher corrected me in English once, and I was so confused because the answer was right, but the way that I said the answer was not linguistically correct in English. And so for the longest time, I just went into a shell and didn't want to talk with anyone or anything like that. Find funding. It's really, really important. What are some funding opportunities out there available for you? Scale down if you need. Reduce your overhead, reduce labor, and keep the community connected. The community is very, very, very important. To sustain, you have to track, analyze, and improve. Again, look at this, the PDCA cycle of improvement. Plan, identify what you want to improve. Do a test on possible solutions and check the measure of effectiveness to the solution and roll out the new improved cycle. And all of us have done things similarly. Okay, I know we're at an hour right now, but if you have any questions, please ask your questions in the chat box, and we will try our best to answer them. Again, the questions can be addressed uh, to Nicole or to any one of us. Yeah. Okay. I don't see anyone typing. Oh, Talani is typing and Betty is typing. So we'll wait for their questions. Thank you, Talani. Thank you for that. Oh, thank you. With no questions, that's good. Oh, you're welcome, Betty. I'm glad that he got re-energized for this. Kapua, the PowerPoint will be available, not as a PowerPoint, but you can uh, watch it. We'll have a link to it. If you're on this, we have your contacts, and we'll send you a link to it. It will be on a YouTube channel. Oh, Nicole, you have a question?
Oh yes, Betty, I believe Pa'atautano does have some of the books, the chants and songs books available. Um, Keonia, do you have their contact information or something that we can share with Betty and the rest if anyone's interested? Um, I don't know if they have a website. I'm not sure if they do, but um, if somehow, Keone, if you can get Betty's contact information or email, I can work through Pa'a and try to get it for her or get it to her, the information to get the book.
Okay. Uh, yeah, thank you, Nicole, for that. Okay. Um, why don't we start wrapping this up? If you have any further questions, um, you should you can email us and all of that. These are additional resources. Again, we have past webinars, community-based planning, asset management, language assessment, and proficiency tools, starting a language program. Some of our other resources is nonprofit toolkit, and we have a Google Plus native language community that you should all consider looking at and joining if possible. You have to have a Google, a Gmail account for that. And if you're looking for grants, there are native language support, Native American language preservation and maintenance, and this is all ANA stuff, yeah. Native American language preservation and maintenance immersion. That's Esther Martinez immersion program, and the Native Language Community Coordination Demonstration Project, but it might not be offered next year. Dana, how do you decide which units you teach for each topic area? That's entirely up to your community. It's not something that is written in stone as to having just one type of unit to be taught for like chant or anything like that. That is primarily decided within your own community. Yeah. Thank you so much. Again, if you need any answers to any other questions, you can email me at keone@kananiel.com. Our phone number here is 808 485 8182. And you can also visit our webpage, which is www.anapacificbasin.org. I see Kapua. Uh, could this type of ANA grant apply to a co-located HLI and Hawaiian focus PCS? Um, it can, but uh, as long as the participants are in the eligible group, that is Native Hawaiian, um, Native American, any tribe that is recognized, any recognized tribe, um, Chamorros, Carolinian who are from CNMI, Tokelauan, and American Samoans. As long as the participants are from these groups, then it can be applied to that. Yeah. It's not so much the program itself, it's the participant pool. Kapua is typing, so we'll wait for that. And Betty is typing. Ai, oi hoi. Nui ke kanaka mauli no ia ne ia no wau ia waia nai so mapopo ana wau. Yeah. So okay. Okay. So with that, I'd like to bring this to a close.